the smell hit me first. Jet fuel and airport carpet and that specific recycled air staleness that lives in every terminal, no matter what country you're in. I'd spent 14 months breathing it on layovers, breathing it on the way out, and now I was breathing it on the way home. My duffel was heavy on one shoulder. My scrubs were clean but wrinkled from the overnight flight. I had a coffee in my hand that tasted like nothing, and I didn't care because in 40 minutes, I was going to be standing in my kitchen, in my house, in the city where I was born, and I was going to sleep in my own bed for the first time since I was 28 years old. I was 30 now, 2 years with Doctors Without Borders, rotating through field clinics in South Sudan and then a longer placement in the DRC. I had seen things I don't talk about at dinner tables. I had also saved money the way only people with no time to spend it can, steadily, quietly, without thinking about it. My house was paid for, not mortgaged. Paid. I bought it at 26 with inheritance money from my grandmother and 2 years of night shifts before I ever left the country. And the deed had my name on it and mine alone. My phone buzzed somewhere over the Atlantic. My mother. Then my uncle. Then my mother again. I didn't answer. 14 months of intermittent satellite signal had trained me to process information in order of urgency, and nothing about those calls felt urgent. They felt like the calls they always were. Someone needing something. Leading with warmth to get to the ask faster. I would deal with it when I landed. I did not deal with it on my terms. The Uber pulled onto my street at 11 in the morning on a Tuesday. The oak tree in the front yard was bigger than I remembered. The shutters I'd painted myself the summer before I left were still that particular shade of slate blue that had taken me 3 hardware store tricks to find. Everything looked exactly the same except for one thing. The lockbox. There was a lockbox on my front door, the silver kind that real estate agents use. I asked the driver to wait. I walked up the front path. I stood on my own porch and tried my key, and the key did not turn because the locks had been changed, and there was a lockbox where my deadbolt used to be, and in the front window leaned against the glass from the inside was a printed paper with the logo of a realty company I didn't recognize. My brain did the thing it learned to do in crisis situations. It went very quiet and very fast at the same time. I called my mother. She answered on the first ring, which told me she had been waiting. "Sweetheart," she said. Just that. Just sweetheart. And in the way she said it, I heard everything she wasn't saying yet. "Mom." My voice was steady. "Why is there a lockbox on my front door?" A pause. A long one. "Your uncle and I need to talk to you. In person. We're at the house. The other house. Come here first." The other house was my Uncle Gerald's place, 12 minutes away. My mother had been staying with him since her apartment lease ran out 8 months ago. Or so she'd told me. I was starting to wonder what else she had told me. I got back in the Uber. I redirected. I sat very still and watched the neighborhood scroll past the window, and I thought about the lockbox, and I thought about the realty logo, and I thought about a conversation I'd had with my mother 3 months ago when she'd asked me, very casually, whether I had ever thought about selling the house, whether it made sense to hold on to property I wasn't using, whether I knew how much the market had gone up since I bought it. I had said no. I had said it clearly. I had said I was coming home. She had said, of course, just thinking out loud. I had believed her. My name is Mara. I am 30 years old. I spent 2 years patching people back together in places the rest of the world was happy to forget about, and I was good at my job because I learned early that sentiment is not the same as strategy. You can feel everything and still keep your hands steady. That is the only skill that matters in a crisis. I kept my hands steady the entire drive. My uncle opened the door before I knocked. He looked like a man who had rehearsed an expression and was finding it difficult to hold. My mother was behind him in the kitchen doorway, holding a mug with both hands like a prop. She'd had her hair done recently. I noticed that. I noticed everything. "There she is," my uncle said, with the particular forced brightness of someone who knows they are about to have a very bad conversation. "You look thin. Come in, come in." I did not go in. I stood in the doorway. "Tell me what happened to my house." The brightness dropped. My uncle looked at my mother. My mother looked at her mug. "We need to explain some things," he said. "It's complicated. Start with the lockbox." He did. It took 20 minutes to get the full picture. And I say full picture loosely because what I was receiving was a curated version. soft-edged, and strategically incomplete. The kind of story that's designed to make the teller seem like they had no choice. Here is what actually happened, reconstructed from what they told me and what I later confirmed myself. My Uncle Gerald had made a series of investments over the past 3 years that had not gone well. The details shifted every time he told them. Bad advice, bad timing, a business partner who disappeared, a loan that was supposed to be short-term. What was consistent was the number. He owed $180,000 to a private lender who was not the kind of person who sends politely worded notices. My mother had known about this for over a year. She had not told me. 7 weeks ago, my uncle had approached my mother with a plan. My house had been appraised at $590,000. If they could sell it quickly, get cash, they could pay off the lender and have enough left to stabilize. The problem was that the house was mine. The solution, in their calculation, was my mother. 4 years ago, when I was first preparing to leave for the field, I had given my mother a durable power of attorney. It was supposed to cover emergencies, medical decisions if I was incapacitated, financial access if something happened, and bills needed to be paid. I was 26, and I trusted her, and I thought it was the responsible thing to do. She had used it to sign the listing agreement. She had used it to accept the offer. She had used it to authorize the sale of my house to a woman named Felicity, a real estate investor from out of state, for $523,000 cash. Closing was in 4 days. I looked at my mother for a long time after my uncle finished talking. She looked back at me with an expression I can only describe as preemptive forgiveness, the look of someone who has already decided that what they did was forgivable and is waiting for you to catch up. "We're going to pay you back," she said. "Gerald has a plan. Once the pressure is off, once the lender situation is resolved, we can help you find something else. The market is—" "Stop talking," I said. She stopped. "The closing is in 4 days. "Yes," my uncle said. "And the buyer? Felicity, has she done her due diligence? She's a cash buyer. She moves fast." She waived the inspection. The title search was— He paused. "Expedited." Something settled in my chest. Not relief, exactly. The sensation a surgeon gets when they realize mid-procedure that the situation is manageable. Not good. Manageable. "I need to see the sale contract," I said, "and the POA document she used." "Mara, we can sit down and—" "I'm not sitting down. I need those documents." My uncle got them. I read them in the doorway, standing up with the morning sun in my face. I had learned something in the year before I deployed that I had never told my mother. I had done it quietly, the way I did most things that mattered. After I signed the power of attorney, a colleague of mine, a doctor who'd done several field rotations, told me about what could go wrong. She had seen it in her own family. She told me to protect myself before I left. So I did. 6 weeks before my first deployment, I had transferred the deed of my house into the Mara Chen Revocable Living Trust. I was both the grantor and the sole trustee. The trust owned the property. I did not own the property as an individual anymore. A power of attorney grants authority over the individual, not the trust. My mother did not have authority over the trust. She had never had authority over the trust. She had never had authority over the trust. She could not have legally transferred the property because the property was not hers to transfer. The signature on the sale contract was fraudulent, and the buyer had wired $540,000 based on it. I folded the documents. I put them in my duffel. "I'm going to meet the buyer," I said. "Mara." My mother's voice cracked slightly. "Please, don't make this worse." "I'm not going to make anything worse," I said. "I'm going to end it." Felicity was at the house at 2 o'clock that afternoon for a final walkthrough. I knew this because my uncle, in a moment of panicked helpfulness, had texted me the schedule. I arrived 8 minutes before she did. I sat on the front porch step with my duffel and my cold coffee, and I waited. She drove a white Range Rover, and she parked it with the kind of precision that says a person has parallel parked in premium real estate markets their whole adult life. She was in her mid-50s, a blazer, reading glasses pushed up on her head, a leather portfolio tucked under one arm. She looked at me on the porch steps the way people look at things that aren't supposed to be there. "Can I help you?" she said. "I'm Mara," I said. "This is my house." She recalibrated quickly. She was a businesswoman. Her expression shifted from confused to cautious. "The seller's representative told me the property would be vacant for the walkthrough." "The seller's representative," I said. Didn't have the authority to tell you anything about this property. She looked at me for a moment. Then she opened her portfolio. I have a signed contract, she said. I have a deed transfer. I have a completed wire transfer for $540,000 that cleared yesterday morning. You do, I agreed. Would you like to see something else? I pulled out the certified trust document. The original. The notarized copy. The stamped deed to trust transfer with the recording date clearly visible. She took them from me. She was very still while she read them. The kind of stillness that means a person is doing very fast math. This trust, she said slowly, this predates the listing agreement by 4 years, and the woman who signed has power of attorney over me as an individual, not over the trust. The trust has no authorized agent except me. She raised her eyes from the documents. I watched her work through it. I have sat across from a lot of people delivering difficult news, and there is a pattern to how people absorb it. First the refusal, then the calculation, then the pivot. Felicity went through all 3 phases in about 11 seconds. The deed that was transferred to me, she said, very carefully, is not valid. No. I paid $500,000 for a fraudulent deed. Yes. The portfolio went under her arm again. She pulled out her phone. Give me your uncle's number. He's at 4412 Delwood Drive. I can take you there if you'd like. She did not want me to take her. She wanted me off the porch. But I didn't leave because what happened next was not mine to manage. My mother and my uncle had set something in motion that I had not stopped and had not been able to stop. The wire had cleared. The money had moved. $180,000 of it, I would later learn, went directly to the private lender that same morning. Gone. Whatever remained was in an account my uncle controlled. Felicity made 2 calls in her car. Then she drove to Delwood Drive. I stayed on my porch. I had not eaten anything since the airport. I found a granola bar in the bottom of my duffel and I sat on the steps of my house and I ate it and I watched the oak tree. And I let myself feel for the first time since I landed exactly how tired I was. Not the 14-hour flight kind of tired, the kind that comes from spending 2 years holding yourself together by will and training in places where falling apart isn't an option, and then coming home to find that the people who were supposed to be safe had made themselves into another kind of emergency. My phone rang. My uncle. I didn't answer. Then my mother. I didn't answer. Then a number I didn't recognize. I answered that one. It was Felicity's attorney. The next 4 hours were efficient and brutal in the way that legal situations become when the people involved are motivated by money rather than emotion. Felicity had not bought my house with her own funds. She had investors, 2 of them. When she explained to them that the deed was fraudulent, they contacted their own attorneys, who contacted the DA's office. Because $540,000 wired across state lines based on a forged real estate transfer is federal wire fraud. This is not a gray area. My uncle was served notice before dinner. My mother was interviewed by the time the sun went down. I did not watch this happen. I was at the house, methodically changing the locks, because I had called the locksmith at 3 p.m. and he had arrived at 4:15 and taken the realtor's lockbox off my door and replaced it with hardware I chose myself. The sound the old lockbox made when he set it on the porch was very satisfying. I was inside, making tea in my own kitchen, when my uncle called for the 5th time. I answered. You need to stop this, he said. You need to call them off. Tell Felicity's people it was a misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding. We were going to pay you back, Mara. I told you. Once the lender situation. You sold my house, I said. You used my mother to do it. You wired away $180,000 of someone else's money the morning it landed, and now you're asking me to call it a misunderstanding. I saved my life. You don't know what these people were going to do to me. That's not my debt. You had a house you weren't using. You weren't even here. That is the argument you're going with? You're going to put your own mother in legal jeopardy over a house? I looked around my kitchen. The slate gray walls I'd painted the summer I turned 26. The shelf where I kept the cookbooks I hadn't opened in 2 years. The window over the sink where I used to drink my coffee before the airport coffee, before the satellite phones, before all of it. I'm not putting her anywhere, I said. She made her own decisions. So did you. Mara, don't call me again tonight. I hung up. My tea was ready. I drank it standing at the window, and I watched the street go dark. and I thought about a woman I had worked with in the field, a logistics coordinator named Yolanda, who told me once that the hardest part of her job wasn't the work itself. It was coming home, not the reentry, the revision. The way being gone for so long meant that when you came back, you could see people clearly, see what they actually were versus what you'd needed them to be. I understood her now in a way I hadn't then. My mother called at 7 the next morning. I answered. "I need you to understand," she said, "that I did not want to do this." "Tell me what you did want then." "I wanted Gerald to be safe. I wanted the problem to go away. I thought you'd be angry, but eventually you'd understand. You have good instincts and you're practical. You would have seen that the outcome wasn't so bad. We would have found you something else." "The market, Mom." "I know. You signed over my house without asking me, without telling me, while I was working in a place where I couldn't even reliably call home. You decided that your brother's situation was worth more than my security, and you used legal access I gave you out of trust to do something I would never have agreed to." A long silence. "I know," she said again, smaller this time. "I'm not going to make it easier for you," I said. "I'm not going to call Felicity's attorney and soften the picture. I'm not going to tell anyone it was a misunderstanding. It wasn't. I'm going to cooperate with whatever process comes next, and I'm going to tell the truth when I'm asked to, and whatever happens after that is what happens." "And us?" I had expected this question. I had been thinking about it since the porch steps. "I need time," I said. "I'm not going to tell you I'm fine with this. I'm not fine with it. I might not be fine with it for a long time." "That's fair," she said quietly. "Don't mistake me being honest with you for forgiveness. I'm not there." She didn't argue. That was the most honest exchange we'd had in years. The investigation moved quickly because Felicity's investors move quickly. Federal wire fraud has a way of accelerating timelines that local disputes don't. My uncle cooperated when he understood what cooperation would mean for his sentencing. He had, it turned out, also forged a secondary document, a trustee authorization letter, badly done, that a first-year law student could have identified as fraudulent. The fact that Felicity's team had not looked closely enough was a problem for Felicity's team. The fact that my uncle had fabricated it was a problem for him. He pled guilty to wire fraud and forgery. The sentencing was 4 months later. I did not attend. My mother was not charged. The DA determined she had been a secondary actor who had not understood the full scope of what she was signing, which I believed was approximately half true. She had understood enough. She had chosen not to understand the rest. That distinction was not visible from the outside, so she was not charged, and I did not dispute it, because my goal had never been to destroy her. It had been to keep my house. I kept my house. Felicity recovered $290,000 of her funds through a civil suit against my uncle's remaining assets. The rest was gone. That was a hard lesson about skipping title searches on cash deals, and I had some sympathy for it, and also not very much, because she had moved fast to beat the market, and the market had not been the thing that got her. The private lender who received the $180,000 was a separate legal matter that I was not involved in. I understand it resolved eventually. I did not follow it closely. Spring turned into summer, and I reopened the house room by room. There is a specific kind of stillness that a place holds when it has been empty for a long time. A held breath quality, like it has been waiting. I had friends help me repaint one of the back bedrooms. I bought new plants for the kitchen windowsill. I signed a contract for 3 months of non-field consultation work, the kind of work you do by video call from wherever you are, which in my case was here. I was, for the first time in years, somewhere without an exit date. My mother and I spoke twice a month. It was careful and surface level, and I was all right with that for now. Some distances close slowly, some close partway and stay there. I did not know yet which this was. What I knew was the morning light in my kitchen, the oak tree. The shelf of cookbooks I finally started opening again. I had come back to find my house sold. What I had actually found was what couldn't be taken. The preparation I'd made quietly, alone, 2 weeks before I left, out of a discipline I hadn't known I would need. Every document in order, every boundary in writing, every asset behind a wall that required my signature and mine alone. I used to think that protecting yourself from your own family was the loneliest thing a person could do. I think now that it's just a different kind of love, the kind that doesn't need witnesses, the kind that's still standing when you come home. Drop a comment and tell me if you've ever had to protect yourself from someone you trusted. How did you know it was time? People ask me sometimes if I regret not answering my mother's calls on the flight home. If I think about it now, the phone buzzing in my lap somewhere over the Atlantic, her name on the screen, me watching it until it stopped, I don't feel guilty about it. I feel something closer to grief. Not for the house, for the version of her I believed in long enough to hand her a document with my signature on it. That's the thing nobody tells you about trust. It doesn't just break in the moment of betrayal. It breaks retroactively. Every memory you have of the person gets quietly revised. The conversation 3 months before I came home, when she asked if I'd thought about selling, I'd filed it as idle curiosity. Looking back, it was reconnaissance. What Gerald did was straightforward in its wrongness. He owed money he couldn't repay. He found a resource he didn't own, and he reached for it. That kind of thinking has its own gravity. It pulls in whoever is close enough and willing enough to go along. My mother was both. She loved her brother. She wanted the problem to disappear. She told herself that I was practical, that I would adapt, that what she was doing wasn't really taking because it would eventually be returned. That is how people justify things they already know are wrong. They build a story where the harm is temporary and the necessity is permanent. What she didn't account for was that I had thought further ahead than she had. Not because I suspected her specifically. I want to be honest about that. When I set up the trust before I deployed, I wasn't thinking about my mother or Gerald. I was thinking about the fact that I was going somewhere dangerous, that I was leaving behind a life I had built myself, and that the world does not pause for absence. I was thinking clearly in the way that you learn to think clearly when your job requires you to plan for outcomes nobody wants to imagine. So I made the plan, I signed the documents, I recorded the deed, and then I left. That preparation didn't come from cynicism. It came from a kind of self-respect that I'd had to learn slowly. The same way I learned most things that matter, not from a classroom, but from watching what happened to people who didn't do it. I had seen colleagues come home from deployments to emptied bank accounts, dissolved partnerships, relationships that had quietly collapsed while they were away. The common thread was always the same. They had trusted without structure. They had believed that love was enough of a guarantee. Love is not a legal document. Intention is not a deed. What you feel about someone does not bind them to what you need them to be. I don't say that bitterly. I say it the way a surgeon says that feeling healthy is not the same as being healthy. As a fact, not a punishment. My mother and I still talk. It is careful. It is not what it was, and I have made a kind of peace with the possibility that it may never be what it was. What I owe her is honesty. What I owe myself is the same. And the honest truth is that what happened changed how I see her in ways that are probably permanent, and I am still deciding what to build in that changed landscape. Slowly, without forcing it. The house is still mine. The oak tree is still out front. Some mornings I drink my coffee at the kitchen window and I feel the full weight of how close it came. And also, underneath that, something quieter and more durable. The feeling of a person who prepared for the worst and came home to find the preparation had held. That is enough. For now, it is enough.